Hi everybody and welcome back. Well, I was hoping to do some outside jobs today. Our overnight temperatures are finally warming up to the point where I can cut back all of the old growth on the perennial herbs. There's a lot of nice new growth starting, but it's really windy out, so it's not that great for filming. So I thought I'd put that off until tomorrow. It's going to be a lot nicer. I have a lot of soil blocks to pot up anyway. So I have 3 trays of sweet peppers in soil blocks that need potting up. So while I do that, I thought I would talk seeds and seed starting. So we're gonna start with the Yankee Bells. I've grown these before. These are really great. And I have the labels on painter's tape. I'm just gonna peel off and stick onto here. So what I want to address first is GMO seeds, because I see a lot of conversations like this online. And there you go, there's an example of a really nice soil block root system. The roots are starting to come out the bottom a little bit. It doesn't even have its true leaves yet, but those roots are going to want more space. So GMO seeds is what I want to talk about first. There's a lot of talk about finding non-GMO seeds and making sure that you're supporting companies that don't have GMO seeds for sale. Well, GMO seeds are not actually available to the home gardener. Whether or not those seed packets say that they are non-GMO, they're not. GMO seeds are only produced for farmers, and I believe they even have to have a special license and sign a contract in order to grow GMO seeds on their farms. You see a lot of home gardener seed packets labeled non-GMO. That is just for marketing. So they know that a lot of home gardeners, they haven't read up on GMOs. It's GMO in general is a popular topic of conversation. But that is not something you have to worry about. It's a highly regulated industry, available only to larger scale farmers and only for a few certain crops too, wheat, corn, and soybeans, I think, and a couple more along those lines. So there is zero likelihood that you will go to buy a seed packet anywhere and have it be genetically modified in any way. It's just not a thing for home gardeners. So when you do go seed shopping, you're going to see a couple of different terms, like hybrids and open pollinated and heirloom seeds, for example. So hybrids are simply the result of 2 parent plants being cross-pollinated together, usually because they have some sort of desirable trait from each one. For tomatoes, for example, really good fruit on one plant and really good disease resistance from another, and then they'll pollinate those together, and then you'll end up with a hybrid. These are really great to grow in your garden, and you can get organic hybrids. What you won't be able to do though is save the seeds from those plants. Well, you could, and they might even be viable, but they will revert back to one of the parent plants. So it won't be the same, you won't get the same sort of fruit that you harvested the seeds from. Next thing you might see is open pollinated. And open pollinated simply means that it's been left up to nature for the insects and the pollinators to pollinate these crops, and it has not been done with any sort of human intervention. So these are generally more stable ones that you will be able to save the seeds from. And the same as heirloom, which is where we're going next. Heirloom seeds they're also open pollinated, but they're generally much older varieties that have been passed down through generations, some really unique varieties as well. So they're also open pollinated, so you will be able to save the seeds from those. But often older varieties also come with a poor disease resistance, and sometimes they're more susceptible to pests and things like that. So where you can find some really unique and interesting varieties, sometimes it is really hard to keep those plants alive. And I'm thinking mostly of tomatoes again because of blight. Blight can be a big issue. So that is where something like a hybrid would be beneficial. So the other terms you might see would be organic, and I think most people know what that means. Organic crops are grown without the use of synthetic pesticides, herbicides, and fertilizers. Treated seed is a little less common. Treated seeds are not organic. They have some sort of a chemical coating, which is usually a pesticide, herbicide of some kind. These peppers have beautiful roots. Look at that. So this is why I like to pot them up at this stage. You know, the soil blocks will control germination so that I don't have to waste any seeds. But at this stage, they come apart really easily. If I left them, those roots would grow into each other and they'd become a bit of a tangle and defeat the purpose of having them in soil blocks. This way I can take them apart without them being disturbed, put them into more soil space. So I talked about treated seed. Yeah, treated seed is not organic. You sometimes see pelleted seed though. That's, I might as well mention that as well. And pelleted is just a clay coating. It's not a chemical coating of any kind. And it's more common with small, tiny little seeds that are really hard to handle. I've seen carrots and Lisianthus, actually. All the lizzies I planted this year were all pelleted seeds. And that's just to make them easier to handle. And that clay coating is water soluble and will dissolve often before the seed even germinates. So the next few weeks will be prime time for seed starting. So I wanted to talk about that too. So I'm moving on to my Italian sweet peppers next, which I've also planted before. These are a really nice one that I always enjoy. When it comes to starting seeds, the basic things you need to think about are seed depth, temperature, and light. And seed depth is generally about twice the depth of the seed. So if you have a tomato or a pepper seed, you know, that are, let's say, 1/8 of an inch, then you might want to plant them 1/4 of an inch deep or so. This isn't something that, you know, if you're off by 1/4 of an inch, it's going to completely fail. That's just a rough guideline. I lay mine just right on top of my soil blocks. And as long as the seed doesn't dry out, they come up just fine. And at this point, I'm planting them a bit deeper into the soil. So any of those small, tiny seeds, some of them just look like dust. Snapdragons are really tiny seeds, and lettuce is fairly small. But with your smaller ones, it's good to look them up because some of them need light to germinate, and lettuce is one of those. That's, I believe they call that photosensitive. So the most important thing you can do is read up on the individual seed that you're starting. But as a general rule, tiny seeds can be sprinkled on the surface and kept misted, and larger seeds can be planted about twice the depth of the diameter of the seed. Temperature depends greatly on what you're planting. Peppers and tomatoes are definitely heat-loving crops, and I always put those on my heat mat to germinate. Cool crops like lettuce and onions, spinach, beets, chard, broccoli, brassicas, all those crops that can handle some frost, those don't need to be started on any sort of a heat mat. They will germinate just fine in room temperature or below. 15 to 20 degrees or so is fine. Remember that germinating faster is not necessarily a good thing, as they can get leggy and their growth will be much weaker. And too wet is definitely a problem. Remember that your seedlings, the roots of your seedlings need oxygen just as much as they need water. So if your soil is moderately moist, enough to soften the seed coat, that's fine. If they're sopping wet, you're going to have problems with, you're going to have fungal issues. You can get mold, and damping off disease is a really common problem. So damping off is when your seedlings will look really nice and they'll come up and they'll start to form those first leaves, and then one day you'll look at them and they'll be completely flat, almost like something cut them off at soil level. And that's a fungal issue called damping off. And there is no way to recover from that. Once it falls over, it's toast. Sounds harsh, I know, but it's true. So, and that's from keeping it too wet. So another reason why I love the use of these trays, I have my cell pack insert in here, and then the tray underneath has no holes in it. So when I water these, I'll pour the water into the tray. I'll lift up the cell like this and water it from the bottom. So that way the roots can soak them up from the bottom, and then the surface of the soil won't get nearly as wet. You will hear things like, well, you can sprinkle cinnamon on the soil, and cinnamon does have some antifungal properties, but I was not able to find any reports of cinnamon actually preventing damping off or fungal issues. And I have seen people use cinnamon and still have mold. So I wouldn't rely on that. I think that's more of an old wives' tale type thing. Even if you're, you swear that it works, you can use all the cinnamon you want, but if you're keeping your seedlings too wet, then you're still going to get problems. You also see a lot of hacks online about starting seeds in eggshells or egg cartons or ice cream cones even. Let's deal with that one first. Can you imagine what an ice cream cone is going to look like after being full of wet dirt for a few weeks? Yeah, that's going to be super gross. If you've ever given a kid an ice cream cone and looked at it 10 minutes later, it's already falling apart. There's no way that thing's going to hold up. And they make biodegradable, like the Jiffy pots, right? They're biodegradable pots. I'm going to have to actually do the math on this because I'm curious now, but wouldn't it be more expensive to buy ice cream cones than Jiffy pots? They're going to get so gross. So don't do that. Egg cartons are commonly used, and I tried this once. The problem with egg cartons is the cells are so small. So when I tried them, I think I planted beets, and I put one in each, and I cut them into strips so that I could just lay them in the row and not plant them individually. The problem though was it was really hard to get them flush with the soil. So you got all these air pockets underneath, and they never really did that well. Now I'm not sure exactly why, but I didn't have very good results planting in egg cartons. And I have seen that some other people haven't really either. If you are going to use egg cartons as for starting your seeds in, you're going to need to cut it apart and plant them individually. And make sure that the seeds aren't in them for more than, I'd say, 2 to 4 weeks, depending on the crop, because there's not a lot of space for soil in there, and they're going to get root bound pretty quick. And the same with the eggshell. If you have a half of an eggshell, that's not a lot of space for roots either. And there's more of a problem when you plant that directly in the ground, because eggshells take a really long time to biodegrade, and those roots will not be able to get out in one season. So you're essentially keeping your plants root bound for the whole season, and they're not going to do anything. So I want to mention peat pellets as well, those little round discs that you put in water and then they magically seem to get a lot bigger. Those are all produced with peat, and peat's been getting a lot of attention lately, not so much in America, but in the UK, they're way ahead of us on this, and they're talking about an all-out ban on using peat, which is a good thing. The problem is here in North America, a lot of our soil products are made with high concentrations of peat. And peat is one of the largest carbon sinks on the planet, which means that it traps and stores carbon, which is a huge contributor to climate change. And when we're scraping all that off to use in our soil products, it's releasing all that carbon back into the atmosphere, and it takes a really, really long time to regenerate. It's been a few months since I read about this. But you can find this information pretty easily. It's something like 100 years for 1 centimeter of it to build up naturally. Don't quote me on that. I recommend you look that up for yourself, but that number was shocking when I read it. So the peat pellet discs, in addition to them not being very environmentally friendly, they dry out really fast. And those little mesh bags that hold them together are not biodegradable. So that's all the specific stuff I had on my list. Oh, here's a good thing to talk about too. So while I have this here, do you see that little pepper plant still has its seed casing stuck on? Now in a lot of cases, that's going to pop off pretty naturally. I'm just going to take my small little clippers here and cut the side, if I can do that without, oops, soil blocks falling apart. I'm going to snip the side off of that. I'm not going to cut the whole thing because a good amount of the leaf is still in there. I'm just going to try to trim off the sides a bit. And then I'll mist it too. This is a common problem with soil blocks. If there isn't enough humidity, the seed casing won't soften. Oh, there we go. Perfect. the seed casing won't soften enough for that to pop off. So if you mist them a lot, if they're under a humidity dome, then shouldn't be too much of a problem, but keeping them misted can help with that as well. So there's all my Italian sweet peppers. I just need to water those next. And that's all of the seed starting points that I wanted to talk about. So I will do this again. If there's anything I've left out that you want me to talk about, then I'll consider doing this again. So for those of you who've watched my videos in this room before, you might notice a brand new shelving unit behind me. Actually, no, the shelving units are not new. I had one in the corner and one here in front of the window with plants on it, but the lights are new. So no, I did not find more ShopLite fixtures, but what I did is I thought I would try out some LEDs, and I was surprised to find some online that were actually cheaper for a pack of 4 than my fluorescent ShopLite bulbs. So I jumped at the chance to try those out since they were cheaper than the ones I was originally going to get, and the reviews were pretty good. So I took them out of the box and got them all set up yesterday, and actually my old ones I moved to this shelf behind me, and the new ones are right here. So there's my old ShopLite fixtures here on the new unit. And here are the new ones. And there's a couple of big differences with these. First, they're linkable. So all of these are linked together, 2 on this side, and then this one is linked to this one on the other end. So that means it only takes up 1 outlet. Since they're LED, they use a lot less power anyway. And I've read some reviews that the LEDs tend to produce better results than the fluorescent ShopLights. So I brought these over here, and then I put the fluorescent ones by the window. That way they'll get a little bit of natural daylight as well. So that's it for today. Thank you so much for watching. I'll take you along with me over the next few days when I uncover my no-dig beds and prepare to plant out a lot of the cool flowers that are outside in my greenhouse right now. So stay tuned for that, and thank you again for watching. Bye.